Good afternoon. Let us begin today's service by reciting the Sunday congregational prayer. The words will be shown on the video screen. Sorry? Yeah. Let us now pray together. We offer our salutations to the all-loving being who endows all beings with consciousness. We meditate on the Lord, who is the origin of the universe. Lord, thou abidest in all. Thou art all. Thou assumest all forms. Thou art the origin and goal of all. Thou art the self of all. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss. Salutations unto thee. May the world be peaceful. May the wicked become gentle. May all creatures think of mutual welfare. May our minds be occupied with what is spiritual and abiding. May our hearts be immersed in selfless love for the Lord. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So friends, we are privileged to have with us tonight a guest speaker. He's actually a well-known personality here, doing service in many capacities. He's currently a professor of mechanical engineering at UMass Dartmouth and also a distinguished member of their Center for Vedic Studies. He's a past speaker here at Vedanta Society, and his chosen topic for tonight is Vairagya, an essential spiritual practice. Please welcome Professor Sukalyan Sengupta.
Thank you, Chet, for your introduction. And I am reminded of a story. A similar such event was to happen, and the speaker was seated. The person who was to introduce him, he went up to the speaker and he said, "Sir, what would you like me to say about you as part of the introduction?" So the speaker said, "Not much, keep it short." Now this introducer, he wasn't very happy with that answer. So he came to the podium and he said, "Well, about today's speaker, the less said, the better." So, as Chet said, we will look at a very essential spiritual practice. It's called Vairagya in Sanskrit, and the closest translation would be Dispassion. I will go through the etymology a bit, because when we look at such words, they do have multiple meanings sometimes, so we have to be very precise. Then I'll talk a little bit about its importance and some myths associated with it. I hope that I can debunk some of the myths by the end of this talk. We will go through some case studies so that you get a flavor of in real life or in commonplace incidents how it affects or how it works. And then we'll spend some time looking at how to develop this practice or how to develop this quality. So when we look at this word in Sanskrit, Vairagya, the root word comes from raga. Raga in Sanskrit, its original meaning, as you can see, is the art of coloring, dyeing something. So you can envision you have a white piece of cloth and you put it in a red dye solution, and after you take it out, the cloth becomes red. So this redness of this cloth, which is kind of imbued now, the cloth which is imbued with this redness, that is the raga part of it, or you can say the attachment part of it. But as you can see, there are some other meanings as well, secondary meanings. Any feeling or passion, love, affection, sympathy, vehement desire. So this adjective vehement is very important because it's the intensity that gives this property, the raga property. And by the way, when we get to, these classical Indian music concerts, which one will be having next week, most likely you will hear the performer say, "Today I will present this raga." So raga in classical Indian music is a very structured framework. But the idea is the same. What that performer is trying to do is to paint a canvas based on his emotions. So it's again that dyeing, coloring part which becomes very critical in this definition of raga. Now, in Sanskrit, when you add the prefix vi, most of the time it means it's the opposite. So then we come to viraga. And viraga, as you can see here, it means it's all these negative things. Passionless, without feeling, etc., etc. So Vairagya, the word today that we will focus on, is just that property of viraga. And as you can see again, it says, well, freedom from all worldly desires, indifference to worldly objects, asceticism. And the difficulty with this kind of definition is that it's a negative attribute, and whenever you try to define a negative attribute, there are some problems associated with it. Now, before we get to that, I just want to go through the English part of it. Now, as you know, languages develop from usage, and in languages there are certain words that have certain meanings. It so happens that Vairagya in Sanskrit does not have a one-to-one mapping word in English. So what has happened is that when you look at translations, different people have translated it differently. So the most common translations are dispassion, absence of passion. Again, as you see, it's a negative part of it. Renunciation, the practice of giving up something, ascetic self-denial, or detachment. So the process of detaching indifference. So what I would like to do is, as Chet said, I am an engineer by profession. Just a bit of a clarification, I'm in the civil and environmental engineering department rather than mechanical. So what you can think of, the way I like to think of it is that if you look at dispassion, if you look at renunciation, if you look at detachment, then there is a common overlap in these meanings, and that common overlap would be our Vairagya. Okay? Now, as I said, it sounds negative, it's opposite, but it is a very positive attribute to have. Because what happens is that our main problem is that we look at everything in terms of I and the world. And whenever we do that, the I is always very weak, very small, and this world is huge, it's very powerful. So as long as this dichotomy exists, then we will have this problem. And one part of Vairagya is basically to overcome this division, and we will see how we get to that. Now, coming to the importance, in Vedanta, its importance, I mean, it's huge. Many Vedantic texts have pages after pages of description about this particular property. We'll, of course, take just a few as examples. The first one that comes to mind is Adi Shankaracharya. Adi Shankaracharya, he basically advocated this framework, and this framework in Sanskrit is known as Sadhan Chatushtaya, which in English it means fourfold practice. And there he says, well, the first thing you have to look at is discrimination or discernment, viveka. The second thing, vairagya, dispassion. The third, and he then subdivides it into 6 sub-disciplines, and they are called Shat Sampatti, and they are, in Sanskrit, they would go as Shama, Dama, Uparati, Titiksha, Shraddha, and Samadhana. So, tranquility, training of the mind, withdrawal, forbearance, faith, and focus. And then the fourth one, so you can look at them in terms of legs of a stool. The first leg would be discernment, dispassion, then this set of sub-disciplines, and then finally mumukshutvam, which is this intense desire for liberation. So, and Shankaracharya also has some very wonderful passages about Vairagya. We will just look at one or two. Now, about Shankaracharya, his main quality is preciseness of language. I mean, we have many cases where on the commentaries, of course, we have this tradition in Vedanta of commentary writing on these important texts. And there were commentaries before Shankaracharya. People wrote commentaries after Shankaracharya. But what is most beautiful about Shankaracharya is this conciseness and preciseness of language. So this Vairagya, he just defines in this few words. And in Sanskrit, they go as Ihamutra Phala Bhoga Vairagya. And what that means is that, he's talking actually of all these disciplines, the sadhan chatushtaya that I talked about. So the first line is about viveka. So let's not look at it. It's basically this highlighted. Aversion to the enjoyment of fruits of one's actions here and hereafter. So this here and hereafter, these are two very important qualities. And I'm kind of reminded of this story about a couple who lived a very virtuous life. They suddenly met a very fatal accident, and both of them, they died. And then they met Saint Peter, and Saint Peter then showed them, this couple, all the places around heaven, beautiful weather and wonderful music and food and all that. So the gentleman was kind of little hesitant when the time came for food, but St. Peter assured them that don't worry, this is heaven, Here, if you eat all this, no problem with sugar or pressure or anything like that. So be assured. So, and then the wife notices kind of a squirm on the face of the husband. And she says, now what's the matter with you? He says, well, but for your oat bran and all these healthy foods, we could have gotten here 15 years earlier. So the point being that we have this mindset that, well, if we behave very well, if we conform to the rules, and if we kind of make some sacrifices now, we will get something, delayed gratification. We will get the results of all this in our next life or later life. But Shankaracharya is very, very clear. There is no scope for even hereafter. So this quality, what we have to do is to kind of develop it so that we do not have these attachments to these objects or these desires. Okay, right. And then Shankaracharya also says, well, that Tad Vairagyam Jihasaya Darshan Shravanadibhi, so let's just go straight to the translation, is the desire to give up all transitory enjoyments to those of Brahmanhood. Because we know that these transitory enjoyments, they have all these problems associated with them. The problems, the defects and all that. And I'm reminded of this true story. I have read that it is attributed to Swami Brahmananda, but in some other place I've also read another Swami. So I don't know which particular Swami it refers to, but anyway, it is a story which happened in Belur Math. One evening, Swami Brahmananda was kind of seated and people were coming to pay respects, and one devotee, he went up to Swami Brahmananda and he said, Swami, you are so great, you have renounced everything, your power of renunciation is so much wonderful, so great. And Swami Brahmananda said, kind of very mystical answer. He said, well, why are you saying this? I think your renunciation, the devotee, your renunciation is greater than mine. So people, of course, were puzzled. What why is Swami Brahmananda saying this? And then Swami Brahmananda explained, he said, well, you know, I gave up this unreal world for the real God. So whatever be my renunciation, but your renunciation, you gave up the real for this unreal. So your renunciation, of course, is even greater. All right. So then, I mean, as I said, this concept, it has been highlighted in many traditions within Hinduism, not just in Vedanta, because if you look at yoga, and of course, when we talk of yoga, the gold standard, the classical text that we refer to is Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. Now, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra has about 196 verses. But almost all scholars agree that if you were to ask what is the most important verse, that will be verse number 2, where it says that yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. That means it is the control of the cessations or modifications of the mind, cessation of the modifications of the mind. And then Patanjali goes through how and after 10 such verses, we come to what I think is perhaps the most appropriate for our discussion today, and that is verse number 12. Abhyasa Vairagya Bhyam Tan Nirodha. And as you can read the translation, well, this state, which is what we are striving for in yoga, this is attained through two qualities, abhyasa, which means practice, and vairagya. Okay. So in Shankaracharya's Viveka Chudamani, in Vedanta Sara, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, all of them have said this vairagya is very, very important. But of course, whenever we discuss any concept, we cannot do it without seeing how it has been referred to in the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, there are, I mean, depending on how you count it, about 5 or 6 places where this word Vairagya or Virag occurs. But for us, the most important verses is in the 6th chapter. In the 6th chapter, the 34th verse, Arjuna, on behalf of all of us, because as you know in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna's questions, they are pretty much our questions from time immemorial. So Arjuna has heard some verses from Krishna, and then he says, well, chanchalam hi mana pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayoravi sudushkaram. So Arjuna is saying, Krishna, I have heard you, I mean, your verses, but you know this mind, it's so restless. Chanchalam hi mana. And it is extremely turbulent, very strong. It's almost impossible to control. And trying to control it is like holding the wind. So this is what Arjuna is saying. And I guess this could have been said by any one of us in this room. This mind, this monkey mind, so restless, so difficult to control. Now, before we go to what Krishna answers, let's just look at one other verse which I like very much. Again, this is from Shankaracharya. This is in his very famous book called Shivananda Lahari. There he says, Kapalin bhiksho me hridaya kapim atyanta chapalam. The same thing. This, and the reason I put this is because now Shankaracharya is also giving this metaphor of this mind as this monkey mind, kapalim. So, and then Shankaracharya goes on as to how to control it. But the talk of this monkey mind, this imagery comes up in many places. And I'm reminded about this story of a monkey and a gardener. So a gardener was tending a garden, beautiful garden. The gardener put a lot of effort, sincerity, devotion to it, and the result also was, as I said, a beautiful garden. But the gardener had to go to his home, which was in a different town, for a few days, and he was extremely disturbed because now what would happen to the garden? Now it so happened that in that garden, as in India, there were monkeys who used to stay on the trees, and this gardener had befriended the monkeys. So the monkeys said, well, why are you looking so sad? And the gardener then said, this is the reason. So the monkey said, no problem. I mean, all we got to do is just water the plants, right? We can do it. I mean, you go without any hesitation. We'll take care. It's just a matter of a few days. So this gardener, he said, well, yes, all you have to do is just water the plants once in the morning, once in the evening. That's it. So the gardener goes, and after a few days, per his schedule, he comes back. And what does he find? He finds this garden completely uprooted, destroyed. So, of course, he's very angry and sad at the same time. And he asks the monkeys, I just asked you to water the plants. What happened? So the monkey said, you know, we did water the plants, but the plants were not growing. Nothing was different. So we wanted to know the reason. So we wanted to see, is it some problem with the roots? So they uprooted all these plants. So this monkey mind. Now, in Vedanta, the monkey mind has some additional qualities. The one quality that we say is it's like a monkey who is drunk. And now you can imagine, as it is, this is restless. Now if that monkey is drunk, just imagine what his activities would be. And on top of that, it's not just a drunk monkey, but it has been stung by a scorpion. So that is the imagery that we give with, that we typically ascribe to our mind. And then this is a wonderful imagery because it couldn't be more true. So then now let's see what Krishna says. And this is the next verse. So Krishna says, Asamshayam Mahabaho. O Arjuna, there is no doubt, asamshayam, mano durnigraham chalam. Mahabaho is one of the ways Arjuna is referred. So there is no doubt the mind is hard to, the mind is fickle. But then he says that perhaps the most important half of the verse, abhyasena vairagyena cha. Kaunteya, of course, again, it's talking about the son of Kunti. So, abhyasena cha vairagyena grihate. That means, but, I mean, it is no doubt difficult to control. Yes, but we can achieve that again through these two qualities. Abhyasa, practice, and vairagya. So, Krishna is very, very clear. Now, when we talk of practice, we all know how important practice is. And you know that story, right? A bunch of tourists, they are in New York City, and they want to go to the Lincoln Center for Performing Arts. And they are kind of in the near around area. They see a person get out of a cab with a violin case in his hand. And so they ask that person, sir, how do we get to the Lincoln Center? And the man answers, practice, practice, practice. So, so we know the importance of practice. And there are now psychologists have looked at, and there are some psychologists who even go as much as to say that there is no such thing as a genius. Mozart became a Mozart not because he was a genius, but because he practiced, okay? So, and there are all these theories about so many, 10,000 hours of practice and whatever. But anyway, I would like to go to a little different kind of an area. And this is the area which kids find extremely impressive, is that when they go to a circus, and in the circus, we have all these animals, let's say a lion, and this trainer puts his head in the mouth of the lion, and of course this is extremely impressive. And we know that this is not possible unless it has, I mean, this process has gone through lots and lots of practice, okay? So that reminds me of this story. A man was kind of unemployed, was finding very difficult to get employment, bad economic times. So he's thinking what to do, and then a circus comes to town. And then he thinks, well, this circus, I'm sure it would need some, even if temporary, it would need some temporary employees. So he goes to the circus manager and he says, sir, I would like to work in your circus. So the manager says, okay, you know, we had a bear, but the bear died a few days ago. And in the earlier town where we were, the bear was very popular. People loved him. So what you have to do is you have to impersonate as a bear. We will give you the dress and everything. You don't have to do anything, actually. You just come to the stage, and after some time you leave the stage. And so, of course, he's unemployed. He's desperate. What can he do? He has no choice. So he accepts this offer. And so they give him a wonderful bear dress. He comes to the stage. Kids laugh, and it's wonderful. No problem. But one day, this person who is acting as a bear, he gets kind of very arrogant. He thinks, well, I am this bear who is so popular, and yet this manager pays me only such a pittance. And so in his, whatever you call it, in this state, he starts to drinking, and he gets drunk, and now he's stuttering, and very soon he lands in the cage of the lion. Okay? Now can you imagine this? So the moment he sees the lion, of course he's now starting to pray, but he also kind of just squeals a little bit, help, help, and then suddenly he hears, shut up, you guy, otherwise you will get both of us fired. So oh well. So now, so all that I'm trying to say that is that, well, if we practice, and if we, of course, do practice in a disciplined way, in the right way, we can achieve a lot. No questions about it. But practice alone cannot get us to a state, cannot get us to one state, and that is the state of no fear. So what I'm trying to say is that if you practice and you reach the topmost heights of that particular field, that's wonderful, but you still will have the fear. And when we talk about fear, in Vedanta, we come across a wonderful book. It's called Vairagya Shantakam. That means 100 verses on Vairagya. And it is written by a king called Bhartrihari, whose biography is fascinating, but we will not get into that. So 100 verses, we will take just one verse, okay? And it's a wonderful verse. And if you just look at the Sanskrit, even if you, let's forget about the meaning, you'll see every third word is bhayam. Bhayam in Sanskrit means fear. So this verse goes something like this. Bhoge roga bhayam kule chuti bhayam vitte nripalat bhayam mane dainya bhayam bale ripu bhayam rupe jaraya bhayam shastre vadi bhayam gune khala bhayam kaye kritantat bhayam sarvam vastu bhayanvitam bhuvidrinam vairagyameva bhayam. So he goes, Bhartrihari goes into each kind of activity that we cherish. So he says, well, bhoga, this, I'm sorry, so I will read it out to you. It says, in enjoyment, there is the fear of disease. And we always have this. So many times we are enticed by so many things, but we check ourselves because we fear that, yeah, if I am unable to control myself, I'll land into trouble. So in enjoyment, there is the fear of disease. In social position, kule, the fear of falling off. So I have this stature in society, I am respected, but I always have this fear that what if, for whatever reason, let's say, some scandal or some, nowadays it takes only a few seconds on the internet to be defamed. But there's this constant nagging fear. What happens if I lose this social position? Vitte ripalad bhayam. If I have money, then I have the fear of, I mean, if you look at the original translation, it means fear of hostile kings, because it was written in the days when kingdoms fought each other, and when one king conquered another kingdom, he would appropriate all the wealth. So I have just added the word tax collectors, and that I think is more appropriate. So, and I know I have a friend who I know for sure, he has a lot of money. But whenever I meet him, he's always looking gloomy. When the market is good, when I'm sure his portfolio is as a humongous amount, still he says, well, what happens if tomorrow the market crashes? And of course, if the market crashes, you can well imagine his situation. So the point that I'm trying to make is that it is very common that if we have money, we have also this fear of losing this money. Then mane dainya bhayam, in honor, the fear of humiliation. Bale ripu bhayam, in strength or power, the fear of enemies. Rupe jaraya bhayam, in beauty, the fear of old age. And I don't have to tell you anything. The whole cosmetic industry is based on this one fear, this fear of old age. Shastre vadi bhayam, in scholarship, the fear of opponents. Gune khala bhayam, the fear of being betrayed by means of falsehood or misrepresentation. Kaye kritantar bhayam, in body, the fear of death. And that fear, of course, is something every human being has to some extent, some much more so than others. And getting rid of this fear of death perhaps is one of the most difficult things to achieve, even for people who have renounced and have become monks. And I'm reminded of a story that Swami Yogatmananda ji mentioned once. He was at that time a very junior Swami, and one of his monk brothers, he had suffered a heart attack. And so they were able to intervene medically, and they were able to stabilize this patient. And this patient needed an attendant at all times. So Swami Yogatmananda ji was his attendant. And the doctor said, well, we have stabilized him, but there is always this chance that this heart attack another attack may occur. And so if that happens, then you have to give this patient this injection. So Yogatmananda ji said, okay, but how would I know when this person is going to have this second attack? And the doctor said, well, just look at his face, you will know. There is no need for me to explain anything. So all I'm trying to say is that even for a monk, this fear of death, the doctor said, well, you will just know from the face. But I'm also reminded of another true incident. This one was recounted by Swami Sridharananda. Some of you may remember Swami Sridharananda. He came here in that old building to give a retreat many years ago. He is at the Vedanta Center of Sydney. So he recounted this story. This is, I think, early 1950s or maybe mid-1950s. So Swami Sridharananda and a few others were at Almora. Almora is, you can say, not really the foothills, but not too high in altitude either. There is a Ramakrishna mission there. And at that center, at that time, there was a certain Swami by the name of Swami Jagadananda. Swami Jagadananda was a very respected and popular Swami who had the fortune of being blessed by the Holy Mother. So, of course, monks flocked to him. And he was also very learned Swami. So Swami Sridharananda and a few others, they had gone to Almora because Swami Jagadananda at that time used to live in Almora, so they were having these classes. And this incident refers to when they were having classes about the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So every morning they would have these classes. At that time, Swami Jagadananda was 70 plus. And in the evenings, after the morning classes, in the evenings they would go for a walk or a kind of a hike among the hills. So one day, these junior monks were with Swami Jagadananda, and they had climbed a pretty decent height when Swami Jagadananda started having shortness of breath, and his face turned pale, and all the Swamis who were there, they were extremely concerned. In those days, in the 1950s, carrying him to some medical place, very, very difficult challenge. So they were very concerned. And they had among them the Swami Atmasthananda. Swami Atmasthananda was our president until he passed away last year. But this is, of course, 1950s, much younger Swami then. So Swami Atmasthananda was the senior most among them. So they kind of sat him down, Swami Jagadananda, and they said, Swamiji, Maharaj, we are very concerned about your health, and is there anything we can do? So Swami Jagadananda said, my boy, this body has achieved whatever it was meant for. Now, whether this body ends by the side of a tree or in a drain or at the doorstep of the Lord, in the temple of the Lord, it matters the least, okay? So, definitely he had overcome this fear of death. And so the point being that it is possible through tremendous practice, of course. Nothing is easy. Okay, so now let's go to some case studies. The first one is, again, this is a true story, whose renunciation is greater. This story refers to Swami Akhandananda. Swami Akhandananda, as you know, we kind of have some association with him in the sense that Swami Sarvagatananda, who was at this center for 50 years, he was a disciple of Swami Akhandananda. So Swami Akhandananda, his pre-monastic name was Gangadhar. So people used to call him Gangadhar Maharaj. Gangadhar Maharaj, of course, he's one of the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, the very first picture, as I look at it, to my left. So Swami Akhandananda had served Sri Ramakrishna and was at Kashipur also, and was of this original group which decided to form the order on Christmas 1886. So, but what happened is that when Sri Ramakrishna passed away, there was this intense vacuum in many of these monks, and they were finding it extremely difficult to lead a kind of a normal life. So Swami Akhandananda, he decided to travel. He decided to go to the Himalayas. Now he apprehended that if he told his brother monks, they would of course not allow it, and it would be very difficult for Swami Akhandananda to go. So he didn't tell his brother monks. He informed his father. His father, Srimanta Gangopadhyay, his father had at one time wanted to be a monk, couldn't for a variety of reasons. So he wrote to his father that I have decided to go to the Himalayas, and I haven't told anyone but you. I will be leaving Howrah station. I mean, in Calcutta, the railway station is called Howrah station. So I will be leaving by this train at this time. So when Gangadhar Maharaj went to Howrah station, he saw his father. So his father had come. Okay. So then when the time came for the train to depart, Gangadhar Maharaj, as is the custom in India, he took the dust of his father's feet. And his father then said, these are exactly Gangadhar Maharaj's words, quotes, "Go, my son, fulfill your mission in life. This world is unreal. I bless you. May you attain unflinching devotion to God." So this is his father's words. And when the train started to leave, Gangadhar Maharaj says, I was thinking whose renunciation is greater. I, of course, am a monk and I have renounced kind of outwardly all these. But just look at, his father, pretty old at that time, must have, and the custom in India is when you are old, your kids take care of you. So I'm sure Gangadhar Maharaj's father also had that feeling at some time, but he has renounced all those for me. So Akhandananda Maharaj says very clearly that my father's renunciation is greater than mine. Okay. The next story, this is a story, the king and the monk. So it so happened that in a certain kingdom, two classmates, later on one became the king, one became a monk in the same kingdom. Now when the king came to know that his school friend is now a monk, he went to where the monk used to stay and he said, well, we have been friends since school days. I am now the king. Why don't you come to my palace and spend some time there? And the monk said, okay. So the monk came. This was palatial, a very rich king, no problem with any amenities, wonderful hospitality. And so the monk started to enjoy this treatment. So much so that people now started to whisper that this monk, he has been staying here for day after day, now weeks. What's going on? When will he leave? He's a monk. So, of course, they couldn't do much. Ultimately, it went to the king that your friend, most definitively has overstayed. So the king also thought, yes, it's been a while, this man, he came, I thought he was a monk, he would stay a few days and then leave. No mention of leaving. So what to do? The king then decides to directly confront him. So one fine morning, he goes to the monk's room and he says, see, I was kind of naive, I invited you here, but it's been so long. You are supposed to be a renunciate. What kind of monk are you? You have not renounced anything. What's the difference between your renunciation and me? So the monk says, okay, you want to know the difference? Okay. So he says, all right, come with me. Now, the monk and the king, they start walking. They walk and they walk and they walk and they walk. And the king is, of course, tired. After a few hours of walking, the king kind of gives up. He says, well, this is going nowhere. You told me the reason. What is the difference? You haven't said a word. What's going on? So then the monk says, you see, we have now walked for such a long time. You asked for the difference. The difference is that I have detached from all those desires. I stayed in your place not because the food was great and the hospitality was great, but because that's what I felt was the best thing to do. Now, when we have come out, just a few hours of walking, you have given up, but I don't know where my next meal would be, and that's perfectly fine with me. So, when we think of renunciation, we always think as if, well, we have to develop it and we have to, there are certain classes of people who should have much more renunciation. It's nothing like that. As long as we identify with these desires, we have to work towards it. It doesn't matter. Now, there is just one difference between ordinary people and monks is that the monks have outwardly also given up. So from their clothing and all, that they have given up inwardly and outwardly. Okay, so then the next story, this is again a story of two monks crossing the river. So it so happens that in a hermitage there was a guru, and this guru had some students, and he tells two of his students, well, you know, you have a chore to do. You have to go to that place and get me a certain thing. Okay, so they go. Now, it so happened that in order to reach the place where they had to go, they had to cross a river. And at the time that they reached the bank of the river, there were no boats. The river was kind of on high tide. So they had no option but to walk across, okay? So they decided to walk across. It wasn't very deep. But then they saw a lady sitting, looking very gloomy and very pensive. So the junior monk asked, well, mother, what's the problem with you? So she said, well, you know, I have to go to the other bank because my husband is sick, but I don't see any boat. I'm just worried. How would I go? So the senior monk, he says to the junior monk, well, let's not worry about the lady. We are monks. We have nothing to do with her. Let's just cross the river. Let's just focus on that. The junior monk says, no. She needs, she needs to cross the river. She needs our help. So we have to do something. So, well, what to do? So then the junior monk says to this lady, mother, you just sit on my shoulders and I will carry you. So this senior monk is extremely angry and very, protesting a lot. So the entire time that they are crossing the river, he's protesting. I'll tell the guru, this is not something you should have done. You'd never thought twice before offering your shoulder to this lady. Come on. And so they cross the river. The lady then goes her way. These two monks go their way. So, and they are walking to where they have to go, and this old monk is going on with his protestations. What did you do? Why did you do? So this junior monk then says, you know, I gave this ride to this woman only for a few minutes when we crossed the river. And you have been thinking and protesting about this all these hours. So the point being that, again, in this case, the senior monk had this idea that, well, we are monks, we should not touch women, and that was it. But for the junior monk, he saw the need, he helped her as best as he could, and then he completely forgot about it. But the senior monk just couldn't get it out of his mind. And that is something which happens to us again and again. We talked of this restless mind. And one of the things that happens is something happens and we then start kind of brooding over it. And that is perhaps one of the worst possible ways in which we can develop Vairagya or dispassion. All right, so then the next story is about couple walking in the forest. So there is a couple leading a very virtuous life. They are walking in a forest, and the husband is kind of a little ahead of the wife as they walk. The husband sees some diamonds. Of course, they are diamonds in the rough, but still you can make out that they are diamonds. And so he thinks that if my wife were to see this, she would be unable to control herself. So what he does is he just, with his foot, he just spreads some mud over the diamond. So he sees the diamond, he just puts some mud so that his wife cannot see. And this happens 2-3 times, a few times. And then the wife says, what are you doing? Why are you throwing mud on mud? And so the idea being, this husband thought, well, if my wife sees this diamond, she would be unable to control herself. But he himself was the problem. The wife had given up diamonds, the desire for diamonds. As unbelievable as it is, she had given it up. But the husband couldn't. And he was thinking all the time that, well, if I can only cover it with mud, she would not have this desire. So the point being that we judge all the time. And one of the other problems is this judgmental ability of ours. We constantly keep judging about all other things which we have no reason to. Anyway. Okay, so now let's look at some myths. One myth is that, well, this dispassion, detachment, this is good for monks. I mean, I am a householder. We all follow in this latter category. We are householders. So, but as I said, I mean, there is no such thing as some protocol to develop dispassion for householders and some for monks. I mean, there is no difference. I mean, if you read the Gospel, so many times it is asked of Sri Ramakrishna, "Sir, I am a householder. How can I develop this?" And Sri Ramakrishna is so direct that no matter what you are, you can always have this experience of God if only you follow certain lifestyle. All right, so the next one is, this will come once I retire. Now I'm leading a very active life, you know. I have this job and it takes away all my energy and I have to kind of feed my family. And so now dispassion, Vairagya. Well, after I retired, I will then become a true Vairagi. And it doesn't happen really like that. And I'll come to the next one. So this is, brings me to this story. In the Hindu tradition, there is a very, very famous text called the Mahabharata. It's a huge text, and there is a character in Mahabharata called Yayati. And long story short, Yayati, he had a curse that he became old at a very young age, okay? So, now he then had this thing that, well, I couldn't enjoy my desires. I suddenly became old. So he then went to the person who had cursed him and he said, "Sir, is there any way out of this curse?" And the saint said, "Well, if only you can find somebody who can substitute for you. In other words, find somebody who can give up his youth for you." And Jayati goes to his sons. The first son refuses, the second son refuses, and one son finally agrees, the youngest. And then Yayati again becomes young and he enjoys life to its fullest for hundreds of years. And then at the end, after all that, he has these two wonderful passages. And the first one is, "All the grains, gold, animals and women on earth cannot satisfy the desires of a lustful man." So the desires are such that if I think, well, this is my time, and then when I start getting gray hair and when I start putting my retirement application, I would have the kind of cessation of desires, it's never going to happen. All the grains, gold, women on earth cannot satisfy the desires of a single lustful man, okay? And then the next verse is, Najatu Kama, I'll just go to the translation because I'm looking at the clock now. "As supplying ghee or clarified butter to a fire does not diminish the fire, but instead increases it more and more, the endeavor to stop lustful desires by continual enjoyment can never be successful." Okay. So, the story of Yayati is very, very clear in that respect. Okay, so now let's go to the other two myths. Dispassion in work will make me a non-achiever, unambitious. And this question comes up again and again. Well, I work because I have certain ambitions, that this work will get me to this place where I would have this name and fame and stature and all that. And now you are asking me to kind of detach myself from this? And the answer is no. I mean, we are, the idea here is not to be detached when you are working. The idea is to be fully attached. But the moment that work ends, you completely detach. And there is this very famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, you work, but you have no authority to the fruits of that work, okay? So, in fact, scriptures are very clear that if you develop Vairagya, your work will be much more productive. And part of the problem with us is when we say we are immersed in our work, it's not really a very true statement most of the time. Because yes, we are immersed in the work, we are doing the work, but we're constantly thinking of these other things. This work will get me to that place. And it's that kind of mindset that is the problem, all right? So, dispassion, if you are able to attach and detach kind of at will, that will make you much more productive. And then the other very kind of regular comment that we hear is, well, are you asking me not to love my family, not to love my friends? Because if I detach, well, I will become just a robot, a zombie. And again, the answer is no, that's not what the scriptures say. And that's when we read the gospel in so many places, Sri Ramakrishna again says the same thing, that our problem is the definition of love that we have. And as Swami Vivekananda says, it's kind of a trader's bargain. I mean, we are making a deal. Well, you give me this, I'll give you this. And we call that love. But true love, of course, is unconditional, number one. And if we are able to develop that feeling of true love, we will never have any problem in terms of not meeting others' expectations. Okay, so all that I'm trying to say is, if we can develop this dispassion, it will make us more productive at work, and it will make us more loving of others without condition, unconditional love. Okay, so then the question is in a few minutes, how to develop it. And as Shankaracharya says, the first thing we have to do is, whenever we are confronted with an issue, a desire, we have to analyze what is real and what is unreal. Because if that becomes clear, then the rest is very easy. Because if we know what is real, then our attachment to these unreal things will automatically drop off. Then, of course, holy company, and holy company, I take a very expansive view. Holy company includes books, lectures, YouTube videos, etc., etc. Need of a guru. This is very, very important, because theoretically, you can develop Vairagya without a guru. There are even some instances in our tradition where people kind of got it, you can say, from divine dispensation. But the guru helps it make so much easier, so much more fun. So I think need for a guru is very critical. And then finally, some kind of a progress check. I mean, we don't have to advertise it to others. We don't have to publicize it. It's entirely our own development. So some kind of a progress check that after, let's say, 6 months or a year or whatever, we should analyze it very frankly. But there is always this danger of analyzing it frankly, in that some people have this temperament that, oh, I have not achieved anything, so many years have gone by, I'm doing all the things that my guru asked me, and yet, and that is very dangerous. So when we say a progress check, if we are not meeting our expectations, then we should look at it in terms of, well, what are the things that I need to do, rather than kind of brooding and becoming very negative. Because as we heard from Mother Teresa a few weeks ago, this negative thing also has its own loop. In engineering, we have this negative feedback loop. That means something bad happens, and then it triggers something, it makes it worse, and it goes on in a loop and loop until it comes to a total downfall. So we need to kind of be very cognizant of that. So with that, I would like to end with a prayer to Thakur and Holy Mother that with their grace may we develop Vairagya and make progress in our spiritual life. Thank you. Time for a few questions. Questions? Okay, Chet. Floor to you.
Well, first, thank you to Professor Sengupta for an analytical and very practical approach with lots of stories and points on how to achieve this important topic in Vedanta. For the month, June, this is the last month of our regular session, so there's a lot of important programs for the remainder that I'll point out. First, on Saturday, June 16th, starting at 9:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. is a full day, a day-long spiritual retreat. And the topic is Yoga Psychology, Managing the Mind. And that will be given by Prof. Brahmaprana, a nun at the Vedanta Society of Dallas, Texas. You do need to register for that. Registering is $20 if paid for before June 5th. Otherwise, it goes up to $30. Next week, the talk will be given by Swami Yogatmananda, and the topic is Dialogue with God. I'm assuming the reservations were made, and he will be here. Following that is an Indian vocal concert. Also this month, on June 24th, the annual general meeting will take place after the lecture. And let's see, there's another musical concert on Sunday, June 17th as well, following that lecture. I think that completes all of the things. The classes for the week will go on as usual. You'll have the opportunity to meet Sukalyan over in the corner, as we do at the end of the arati, followed by soup supper downstairs and meditation back here at 7 p.m. So with that, you can join me with the closing prayer. May the divine, who is Father in heaven of the Christians,